Hello, everybody. Glad you could join us for episode number 49 of the Launch and Beyond podcast. A podcast designed to support you in not only achieving great success in your business, but in all other areas of life as well. In our previous podcast episode, we spoke about what's required by a business to earn the trust with its customers and clients, to commence that working relationship or transaction with. Now, equally as important is understanding that this initial granting of trust is only step one. When we consider and study some of the greatest enduring companies, we realize that trust is not a one-time thing that's gained at the start and is there forever. Rather, as in life, it's the continual focus of honoring agreements that solidifies and sustains and grows trust that was originally granted. Yet one violation of this can see years of hard work come crushing down overnight. In this week's episode, our second in our series of trust, titled Developing and Maintaining Trust, we discuss what it takes to continually earn it with your clients and customers and why a focus on this sets you apart from businesses that merely focus on the short game. We hope you enjoy it. Hello again, Adam. This is part 2 of our trust series. Great episode for people who haven't listened to a previous episode about establishing trust. What we're going to be doing today is taking to the next step and talking about what is it that once trust is established that allows you to keep leveraging of that, and how do you keep growing and maintaining that over the long term.
Yeah, this is a good insight on how to grow your brand and make sure that your customer base continues to have that loyalty to you, the way that an Apple person would go for the next iPhone before they even know the specs. They're at that door, they've bought it. So this is a great way to go about it, just maintaining that trust and being loyal, building your loyal customer base.
Yeah. And why it's important to have an awareness around this is we mentioned that, number one, you need to establish trust. I mean, you can't assume that once you've got it once, it's going to be there forever. From a business sense, you're constantly reaffirming and proving why you're trustworthy. So in that process of longevity, you're reaffirming, you're honoring your agreements that keeps building on that trust. And you know why this is important is if we focus on the lifetime value of a customer or a client, it makes good sense that if people trust you and they want to work with you, from a purely economic key performance indicator, your profitability as a business, as an enduring business, will go up because of the longevity and the lifetime value of that client and customer.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before, but building and starting trust doesn't necessarily mean selling something to someone. For instance, we used to, at the kebab shop, we'd have one right across the road from us, and they go, "Who's better, you or them?" And we go, "Well, they are. They have this and this, and that's what you're looking for." And they go, "What? But you're not going to get my sale." I was like, "Well, yeah, but you're not. We don't have the tartare sauce. We don't have it. They do." And they're like, "Oh, all right, cool." And then they're like, "Actually, don't worry about it. We'll buy from you." So we were being honest and building trust because we couldn't serve them. And they go, "Actually, no, don't worry about that. Let's just have what you guys have," because you build in that trust and you maintain it. And that's how we tried to do it with every customer that we had. So next time they go, "Oh, well, these guys are not just going to sell you food because they want to sell you food. They'll sell you the right food."
Yeah.
And that's how we got a bigger customer base when we had 2 competitors across the road from us. And when I mean across the road, I mean 20 meters. It wasn't like across the road and down the road. It was directly across. I could see every customer that walked in their front door. Yeah. So we built that trust and we maintained it over 15 years. And that's how our customer base grew.
And that's a really good point you raised, because when you're able to retain clients or customers, if you're able to deliver and keep getting them to come back again and again, there's a customer retention model that says that even by retaining someone, your customer base by 5%, so increasing your profits from retention by 5%, your profitability increases significantly, anywhere from 25 to 95%. So just by retaining 5% of the people, And particularly if they're people who spend quite a bit with your products and services, just retaining that from a lifetime value point of view is huge. But that doesn't happen. Yes, you got to deliver on the service, but you have to have trust, and you got to keep reaffirming and validating to them that you're the right person for them. And this is what, obviously you're doing in that example is you'd leverage trust by basically saying, hey, this is what we offer. You're letting them know through transparency and honesty. And because of that, they valued that and chose you in that scenario.
Yeah. And again, having my dad there, myself, or my cousin, or my mum, through the 17 hours we were open, it was my mum who was there during the day with myself or my sisters, whoever was scheduled on. And then my dad, me, or my cousin, whichever day, the second you saw us, you're like, oh, they're here. That's the core group. We had other workers, obviously, but once they saw one of us was there, they had the trust. Oh, we're going to get the good stuff today because it's the owners, or, it's the same person I've been served by for 15 years before this. Like today, they build that trust, and the trust is there the second they see you. So it's like they're happy.
Yeah.
And they bring their friends in. Hey, this is the guy I tell you about. He's the one who works 20 hours a day or whatever. But it's part of the story. But they go, we trust that he's here.
Yeah.
They used to call it Eddie's. They didn't call it Lamb on Brunswick Street. They were like, oh, Eddie's, because that's my dad's name.
Yeah.
So they're like, that was more important to the story than the business name.
Yeah. Wow, it's interesting. So this is a great segue into what we want to talk about today is, in our previous episode, we talked about what does it take to get to trust. And this podcast episode is really going to be about, okay, once you've got it, right, how do you keep growing it? How do you keep sustaining it? There's an art about that. Great enduring companies and legacies and 15-year businesses like your kebab shop, basically there's got to be longevity, there's got to be repeat sales, there's got to be trust, there's got to be people who are going, yeah, I'm going to go back again. How do you do that? This is what we're going to talk about today, right, in this episode.
Let me just say, I'm sorry, Jim, it was a souvlaki shop.
Souvlaki shop?
Yeah, I should have said a souvlaki shop.
That's okay.
I'm Turkish background, you're Greek, but
there is a difference.
There is a difference.
But I'll happily eat both. So there are 7 points that we're going to cover. Sorry, six key areas that we're going to talk about. And for anybody who's following the podcast episode, there's some content that we're going to go through today. And as always, you can refer to the show notes that we supply for you if you just want to get an overview of the concept and the content now, and then refer back to that in later on.
Funny, I printed out the show notes from the New Year's Eve show because I was like, this goal setting and planning, and I actually handed it out to a few different people as well. I'm like,
we got some great. I saw that we got some great feedback about that one as well too. So that was awesome.
Thanks,
but yeah,
Nadia.
they come in handy because you can refer back to them. You can go and that's what they're designed to do. You don't if you listen to the podcast, we're always grateful for people listening to them. And also, if you've got a reference that you can go to quickly, you can basically go back to them again, without necessarily having to go, where was it, whatever. You don't necessarily have to listen to the podcast episode again, as grateful as we are that you do listen to it the first time, but you've got a reference there, and that makes it really helpful. So let's go through the 6 points that I mentioned, not 7, 6. So the first point that's really important, and you touched on it before, Adam, is reliability and dependability. So when you talked about, here's this guy, here the owners, they'll put in there. What people are talking about is a level of reliability. And so there are some definitions that I'm going to share today in this podcast episode, but reliability is when you deliver the same result again, which is what you were talking about with the kebabs, right? Or Slovakia, right? Let's get those right. So it's the ability to deliver consistency that gives you reliability, which gives you ultimately trust in the mind of the consumer.
And that goes through our whole supply chain, and that's the current philosophy we use at the factory as well, is I always use the same flour supplier. I always use the same butter. It doesn't matter who's the distributor. I always use the same sugar. I use the same packaging. That way you've got consistency. And that was the same at the souvlaki shop. Was we had the same meat supplier for almost the whole time. We had the same bread supplier for the whole time. We got the same quality of lettuce and mushrooms and tomatoes, and we were on almost like retainers with people because sometimes fruit prices would go up and down, but because we're with the same suppliers all the time, they'd make it consistent price all year long, but we're getting the best quality. And that had the reliability at the end to the end user because they were always getting the best quality tomatoes. They were always getting best quality lettuce and the best quality sauces because we were always using the same suppliers.
Yeah.
So that's how you build the reliability and the trust is that we didn't cheapen our product just to make an extra buck today because then you lose your customer base.
It makes a difference. So I'm going to give you two examples of that exactly. One that where it works exceptionally strongly for and one where it actually didn't, right? So the first example is with McDonald's, right? They've got a consistency and a system around continuity and reliability about a product. So if you buy a burger in one store, within reason, there are individual variations within different zones and countries, but if you buy a Big Mac in America, you would expect that to be exactly the same way in the UK or Australia.
Yeah.
Right? So there's reliability, and that builds trust within the consumer's mind. So that is a really important process that leverages on that. On the counter of that, Coca-Cola, one of the strongest brands going around, if you remember, they tried the New Cola experiment.
Yeah.
And they tried to just change the whole product that people had, and suddenly they had a revolt from their customers going, we don't want this. This is terrible. You've taken what we know we want and you've changed it, told us that. And so consequently, their sales plummeted, and to Coca-Cola's credit, they looked back and went, we stuffed up.
Yeah.
We took for granted that we knew better in that scenario, and they reverted it back to the original formula.
Yeah.
So what gave their brands and gives those brands trust is the reliability. And when you change it on that, there's going to be big pushback. Yeah. And that's what happened with Coca-Cola.
Well, that's why I try not to compromise on your quality. Quality is why people keep coming back. And that's quality of service or quality of product. But if you give that quality, that's why people keep continuing to come back.
Yep.
There's always a cheaper option.
Yep.
That doesn't mean it's a better option.
And you make a really good point there too, because when you have reliability, and the next part of it we're going to talk about is dependability, but when you've got that, people then are more likely to engage you for you as opposed to be price conscious.
Yep.
So quite often, how many times you hear people say, listen, I don't care how much it costs. I want you to do it.
Yeah.
And so that's when you know you've got their trust, and because you've earned it first place. But fundamentally, that's where people become less price conscious in that scenario, because they know they're on the right thing with the person who's looking after them.
Yeah, it's true. And this is a philosophy I live in my life is I don't always necessarily have everything I need, but what I have is the best quality that goes around. And that's because that brand has had years and years of consistent upgrades, good customer service. If there's an issue, they'll fix it. Like every time I go change my phone, and a couple of times I've got dodgy batteries in my phone. So I go, it's not charging or the charging port's off. Telstra will take it back, give me a brand new box with a brand new phone. And they go, here. And that means that I'm always going to go with Telstra or with Samsung, because instantly my issues were fixed. So that shows dependability and reliability, that if there's an issue, they'll fix it.
Yeah. So
that's maybe me. I have very good experiences with the phone companies. I'm not sure about everyone else.
But you've got your experiences, and so whether you have an affinity with one brand or not, it's based on your experiences. It's based on, did they do the right thing by me? And in your case, they have. Yep. So they've been reliable. The extension of that is dependability, which by definition is about, you do what you said you would do when you said you'd do it to the best of your ability each and every time, right? So Samsung done that for you. And so when you're dependable, let's say you're a tradesperson and you say to someone, I'm going to be here at 9 o'clock, and you're there at 8:55, knocking on the door, hey, I'm here, I promise you I'll be here, I'll do that. And you go, hey, this person's quite dependable. I've referred this person to that person, he does the same and same. Your reputational profile and trustworthiness goes through the roof. If you say I'm going to be there at 9 o'clock and you either don't turn up or you're 4 hours late and then rock up, your dependability goes down,
Drops, yeah.
right? So your trust is not building up. So what will happen is, if someone is happy with your service and you deliver a great product, you're bombing on the trust category, and people will choose not to work with you because you're pissing them off.
Yeah.
You're not honoring your agreements. And so I see this happen so many times where people, and it happens a lot in the music industry, right? And we tolerate it. The artist who says they're going to be there at 9 o'clock for an interview doesn't get there for 2 hours late because it's
It's on my time.
yeah, it's on my time, right? But try that in a service-based industry, and it's not going to work really well for you. You could be the best in industry, but people will go, no, I can't do that because they're not reliable, they're not dependable. And so constantly they'll choose not to work with you.
Yeah.
So that's a really important component in there. So point one, reliability and dependability, leverage your trust. And you may have delivered a great service for someone or a product at the start, but if you don't consistently honor reliability and dependability by virtue of the agreements you've set with people, you'll torpedo and sabotage your own success.
Yeah.
So that's point one. So point number two, Adam, that helps to expand, grow, and maintain trust is transparency. And within a business context, it's about being open and honest with your clients and customers. So, telling them what's really going on. And if you've made a mistake, owning up to that and saying, hey, you know what, like you shared an example of that in a previous podcast where you had a small sample of stock or cherries, and someone didn't deliver what you had, you communicated to them and they've gone, hey, sorry, this is what happened. We'll fix it up. We'll take care of it. So that's taking ownership on it and being transparent. There's a big difference between transparency and excuses, and people will eventually see through that, I think. But if you're being transparent and honoring and doing that, I've mentioned before too, a big litmus test for whether people will work with you is how you handle things when things go wrong. And if you're transparent about why that happened and what you'll do to fix it, people will trust you and will continue to work with you.
Yeah. What's the old saying? Excuses are the best heard by the one who's making them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
So if you keep making excuses, they sound good to you, or you're like, oh, this is going to get through. This will be fine. Eventually people get sick of your excuses. If you're transparent, like as I mentioned in the previous podcast, is I went to do a price rise with my customer, but I go, well, this is my costs have gone up here, here, and here. I can't maintain this price point anymore. I need to put in an increase. And they go, yeah, sure, because they know that, fruit's gone up. They know that butter's gone up. They know that oil's going up. So they can understand that my raw materials are going up. I've got no choice but to put up my price. But that was because I was transparent. I go, this is how the percentages they've gone up. I'm not putting on the full percentage, but I'm balancing it out. And they accepted it because I was transparent. I wasn't trying to go, hey, we just need more money, so I'm putting the price up.
Yeah.
It wasn't just off a whim. There was research and there was data behind it. So they're like, yep, this makes sense. But again, that's because there's so much trust going, I'm not trying to take advantage of you. Because if your business grows, then my business grows. So if you keep selling my product in a positive way, I'm going to keep selling product, obviously. So it hurts me to lie to you. It hurts me to go against you. So we're working together as an extension of my company as their company. Yeah. And that's how I feel I bring value to them, because I care about their company like it's my company.
Yeah. And that is so important a concept, because when we look at the level of scrutiny that is out there, if you don't have transparency, it damages your brand very quickly. If you're saying you're doing one thing and you're doing something else, so you're not being openly honest, and someone has a recording of you saying, doing, acting out differently to what you say, there's your brand right there. You've torpedoed trust in an instant. And so you could be doing great things, delivering great products and services for a longest time, and one indiscretion, one area that is not being transparent, open and honest, it undermines it all.
Especially now with all this cancel culture that's happening now. If you say one thing or you stand up for something that some people don't agree with, they'll hound you until you basically lose everything. and that's because they lost trust in you.
Yeah.
I don't like that culture, but that's a fact of life now.
Yeah.
So that's why I know a lot of people who just sit on the fence or don't even talk about a lot of topics because it's just too controversial. You, you know, as you said, you could find one recording somewhere and then that's it. Business is done. So yeah, it's best. We had the podcast Contradictions.
Yeah.
And it's best not to contradict yourself and, live a life like one way and then, behind closed doors you do other stuff.
So that's a really important component is transparency, is being open and honest and communicating. And I really respect companies particularly who they may have taken a particular stance like Coca-Cola who said, okay, we wanted to do this. We mucked up. We are now going back to that. There's a level of transparency that shows that thinking. When you have indifference for your customers or your clients or whatever that is, or whether it's your community, then people will get annoyed with that. You'll lose people as a result of that. But we see that so many times again, that people are prepared to give you a second chance, provided that you're transparent. You can explain. It doesn't happen all the time, as you said. What's happening a lot of the time, there's almost like a pack herd mentality with cancel culture.
Yeah.
But it's within reason. That's quite often what will be the case. If you're up there and you're being transparent, you let people know. I think that gives you the best opportunity to be able to remedy the situation as opposed to just going down the path that you had.
Yeah, well, like for instance with Coke or like that example, they were trying to influence a trend. So that's what they were doing. But they were open enough to say, no, we're not influencing the trend. Whereas I've worked for other companies that I was asking a client, what are the trends that you see? And a person who I work with comes back and goes, no, we set the trends. I'm like, no, what's in the market? Because they see this is like the one time where we can see how their numbers are rating. And then it gives me ideas on how do we improve it. That's when I can sit back and start a new trend possibly, but I need to know where the market is at the moment. And a lot of companies don't do that. They're just like, we set the trends, we make the market, we do this. And
with the analytics that are available these days, right? You just got to get onto Twitter and see what's trending. You get onto Facebook analytics and find out what people are searching. And so you reverse engineer it and give them what they're already looking for. That's a really good, smart way of riding the wave. It's already there. You're not having to create a market. You're leveraging what's already of interest to people and you're giving them a solution to what they're basically asking. That makes good business sense. Yeah, I get it because, Henry Ford quite often said, look, if I waited for people to tell me what they wanted, they'd want a faster horse.
Yeah.
And so that's where I get what they're saying is that because he basically bought the car into production.
Yeah.
And so that was out of trend what people want and they didn't realize they even wanted that. So that's that context. But this day and age, you can build very successful businesses very quickly by leveraging and riding the waves of what people are already interested in and just giving them faster, better delivery systems of those things.
Yeah, just increasing efficiencies in products. Yeah. And you don't have to redesign
That's one business model.
Yeah, don't have to redesign the wheel. Just improve it.
And a classic case in point is when there's something that's topically goes on, how fast are people able to pivot and have T-shirts about that particular topic? Suddenly, I don't know what happens. Like there could be just a world event that happens, and when we had the Black Lives Matter event, how quickly did the T-shirts come out?
Yeah,
and that's just one example. Where people were riding momentum.
Yeah.
And were able to create a product that people went, yeah, I believe in that, so I'm going to purchase that. So that's just one example. It's not condoning. It's not any. It's just basically saying that's a situation where people are seeing a trend, seeing a movement, seeing a pulse in society, and they're monetizing that.
Yeah, well, like look at Victoria. We have Dan Andrews, who's the premier, and then you had people with their masks or T-shirts saying "Dickhead Dan" or "Dictator Dan." But then towards the end, you'd have other people who would be like, he had a slogan, get on the beers or something.
Yeah, did you see how they've got it's
and-
a rap song? Yeah.
yeah. So then there was both positive and negative, but the trends are so fast now, and it was such a hot topic that didn't matter which side you were on, you were you were supporting the cause either way. So it's so fast. Like you don't have to. Again, it was just t-shirts and masks, but you don't have to redesign it.
Yeah.
You just put a snappy.
Had you tried
slogan.
to do that outside of momentum?
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
You wouldn't. So you're leveraging on a trend. That's just being smart. That's using the momentum and the interest that people have in that topic at the time to monetize it. So that's the difference between, we talked about transparency. The third point we want to focus on that builds trust for you is being competent. So if you're really good, if you're world renowned, if your a set of particular abilities and knowledge makes you a subject matter expert, it makes you the best in your field, then you're going to deliver a high quality standard to your clients. We're going to rely on that. They're going to build trust. They're going to know you for that. So if you've got an award-winning restaurant, for example, Adam, that delivers a high level, and I'll bring it back to restaurants, obviously, because it's in your field as well too. But there's a reputation that comes about. There's a trust that comes about from being competent and great in what you do, and people will trust that. As a result of that, want to deal with you, engage you, your products, your services, what it is that you offer. So by and large, delivering a high standard and a high level reliably and consistently builds trust in your end users.
Yeah, like for instance, I've got over 40 awards for cooking. So it doesn't matter that I don't eat meat anymore. When I go to cook meat, people trust me because I've done it for so long. I've got the competency that I know how it should be. And still to this day, 3 years later from not eating meat, people can't tell unless I tell them, hey, I don't eat meat. They're like, try this, it's so good. And I'm like, no, I'm all right, thanks. But they wouldn't know unless I tell them because I'm competent. I've done this for so long now that it's just second nature to me.
Okay, so point number 4 in how to maintain and grow and build and leverage the trust that you've established with your clients and customers is sincerity, authenticity, and congruency. Now I'm going to expand on these points individually first, and then we'll go into a discussion. So when someone's sincere, they're communicating and acting in accordance with an entirety of their feelings, beliefs, thoughts, and desires. So they come across as honest and genuine. So that's sincerity. Someone will give you a sincere compliment. It's coming from the heart, right? Authenticity, you laugh there because they basically say feign sincerity, you've got it made. Authenticity is being true to self and communicating from that place. Okay, and congruency is being in alignment, right? It's between the two of those things. It's basically saying, okay, I acting one way, I'm talking one way and I'm acting that way as well. So there's a congruency. So when we bring sincerity, authenticity, and congruency together, it's actually really, really important because when you're communicating from that place, like if you're a salesperson and someone says the cardinal sin, do I look good in this dress? And a sincere person, Adam and I know going, there is only ever one answer to that, right? However, a sincere and a great salesperson, and I know my wife Bettina's had a stylist who's gone, you know what, that doesn't suit you as well. This doesn't suit you because of your color or your skin tone or that. So perhaps it would be better to do this, this, and this. And if they communicate it in a way that's sincere and honest, you'll trust them for their value opinion. Why? Because they're telling you the truth.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where sincerity can come into it. And we talked a little bit earlier on, Adam, about before we started recording about someone could be telling you that they're telling you the truth, but the delivery of how they deliver that to you is hurtful.
Yeah.
That's not actually sincere. So it doesn't build trust, right?
Just smash you down.
It just smashes you. So there's a difference. We talk about it as life-giving and life-taking.
Yeah.
So someone could be telling you the truth, but the mode with which they tell you that is so hurtful and not sincere that you don't end up trusting them. You go, listen, I don't actually want your feedback purely because I don't want to get smashed.
Yeah.
So there's a certain
don't love me. It's better.
Right. So it's a case of just going. So that's sincerity. Now, authenticity is about you see people and the authentic expression of who they are and what they stand for. Now, we've been long time listeners of the podcast with Andy Frisella and Sel, the MF CEO. Now, the big draw for that podcast is their authenticity and their rawness. They'll tell you that that what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
And the authenticity that comes through that is something that people go, I really feel like I can trust that person because they're going to tell me the truth. I don't feel like it's smoke and mirrors. I don't feel like it's fake. It's authentic and open.
Yeah, and that's why, you hear them swear a lot of the time, but that's how they talk amongst each other.
Yeah.
And they don't change. I've got a cousin who's like that. You know him. We used to train together. And it doesn't matter who's in the room, if it's your grandmother, if it's kids, he'll still be the same person, but he is the same person. And that's what I love about him is the fact that if I produce something that's subpar, he'll tell me instantly. But if I produce something that's good, he'll tell me as well. So he's doing it from a place of love, and he knows that this is my business, this is my career, and he needs to be honest. But he'll swear like a sailor.
Yeah.
But that's him being completely genuine 100% of the time. And I wouldn't change that.
Yeah.
We got to cover the kids' ears every so often.
So but I actually, I trust and respect that.
Yeah.
I trust and respect that because I just know they're being honest. Like we just said, is just how can you be honest and still be sincere is the gift that some people, and with some people you accept it and you tolerate it. You just go, look, that's just the way they are. I'd rather take them that way. They're reliable. And congruency and this is why congruency is a really important component, is because if you say, and we were talking about this earlier on before too, there's some gold that happens in between our podcast episodes before we start. We were talking about someone who, if you champion a cause, if you say, I'm a card carrying, I don't know, vegetarian.
Yeah.
Right. And people will give you, basically pontificate and tell you that this is how it had to be. And then you deviate from that. Someone's seeing you eating meat.
Yeah.
They'll go, hey man, what's going on? So you're not actually being congruent. You're do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Doesn't build trust. And congruency would quite often be, guys, listen, I'm this is the pathway I've chosen. Occasionally I'll have this, or occasionally I'm human, I'll stray. People will trust you for that. They're not gonna basically switch off on you. It's just when people have an extreme, not extreme view, such a righteous view that it's either right or wrong, it's 100% or zero, it's black or white, and they deviate from that. That's where people lose trust. They basically say, I thought you were telling me about this and now you're doing this. It's incongruent, dude.
Yeah. I forget where I was reading it, but there was one person, or maybe it was an audio book, but I forget the book. I think it was about habits. But one of the examples was you should never build your personal brand on something like being vegetarian or vegan, because 10 years down the track, you might change.
Yeah.
And then what's that? That's your whole brand's gone out the door. You've got to rebuild everything. So you don't do it just off one aspect of your life. Just be authentic and open about everything. Someone offers me meat, I go, sorry, but I don't make that a cause when I walk in a room and go say, sorry guys, I don't eat meat. Today we're not going to eat meat. Like, I don't do that, and I'm not righteous, and I'm not. You shouldn't eat meat too. We'll just go get a meal together.
It is the righteousness that actually pushes people away.
Yeah.
So it's anytime that you're trying to influence someone, and the biggest way that people want to find out about it is through curiosity. And so if you invite curiosity by building trust and rapport first, then they're open to listening to your point of view. But if you try and, hammer someone over the head with it, they'll just naturally just push back. That's just what humans do. So that's the component of that.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to give you an example of where, sincerity, authenticity, and congruency are important, and when you violate them, how quickly a brand can change. So the Body Shop is a classic example of this. The Body Shop, for people who don't know, was founded by the late Anita Roddick in the UK, and it was a brand built around cruelty-free toiletries, makeup, and they were very there was a particular movement, there's a particular community, particular culture that was built around that. It was like, hey, we're doing something great for the planet, for the people, and we're different to other basically what are we?
Company,
Makeup
beauty,
beauty companies. I had a mental blank there.
That's right.
So we're different to that. We don't do these. We don't do things. So you can imagine the confusion, the lack of trust that happened when the Body Shop sold out to L'Oreal. And suddenly all these people who believed in the movement were disillusioned. They just went, what was all that about?
Yeah, was it just to make money?
Was it in there? Yeah. And so they lost massive trust.
Yeah.
And so consequently, as a company, as a brand, they've spiraled.
That makes sense because now I walk past and they're empty.
They're empty.
They used to be so full.
Packed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be packed with
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's the story behind that. There was a massive big pushback with Anita Roddick, and that was we used to always do that as well. I've got a real focus on that as well. I don't have chemicals in my home in terms of shampoos, and they're basically anything that can damage my skin. So I'm reading of that movement, and I know myself, I was disillusioned by it. I just went, it's not making L'Oreal wrong. It's just going, hey, I'm choosing this, and now you've gone the total flip of what your whole marketing and your whole brand was about. Now you've lost me as a client and a customer, and I wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
So that's what's happened to them. So that's why you're right. By comparison, they've nosedived big time.
Yeah.
That's what happens to a company when
I just thought it went to heaps of online sales, but it's
No, that's what happened to them. And across the board, a lot of their consumers they sold out and really disappointed and disillusioned the people who believed in them the most. So that's a really important component. So point number 5, Adam, in terms of establishing trust, is a sense of fairness. Okay, so a sense of being fair socially, and I mentioned before. In terms of fairness, it's about not blaming others for mistake, not taking advantage of other people. A sense of fairness, a sense of following the rules is important for people, right? So that's how people build trust. And whenever we see someone who's playing fair, looking out for us, we feel safer. We feel like, yeah, these are the kind of people that I want to associate with. If you watch. And it happens in terms of trust. I've studied companies that get great results, but how they go about that, people don't like. So consequently, they don't trust them, right? So there's a difference between process and outcome. And if people can see, okay, you're getting the results, but at what cost, at what effect, who are you hurting, what are you doing? They can go, yeah, I'm happy with it, but I don't want to actually deal with you because I don't like how you go about it. So a sense of fairness and play, whether it's the underdog, how people like how you go about it, people are moved to that. There's a percentage of people who only focus on metrics of result and outcome only. They don't care how you get the result as long as you get it. And there's a big group of people who are socially responsible who want to know that, like free trade, and how that's happening with free trade and cocoa beans and how they source them from communities that aren't exploited as a means of ensuring that there's a fairness about the trade is what builds trust in a brand.
Yeah, another example is Apple. And not that I want to bash Apple, like everyone has their loyalties, but when they came out with their new phone and it didn't have a charger inside, and a lot of people were like, why not? And then their response was, well, it's for the environment. You've probably got 10 at home. And it was just like, a lot of people didn't trust that answer. It was just like, you just wanted to maximize.
No, that's right. Only because every model, and I think what you're spot on about with Apple, look, I've got Apple products, I've had them all, but it's always annoyed me that every superseded model made obsolete every other device, every other charger you had beforehand. So that was just burning the people who therefore there's a lot of people who just went, that's it, I'm out, because obviously not enough so that it hasn't made them the biggest brand in the world.
Yeah.
But it really disillusioned a lot of people because they weren't playing fair. They weren't allowing you to leverage what you already had. So as a stock owner, you're laughing.
Yeah.
But as a consumer, you were feeling like you were compromised.
Yeah, because it was like, well, where's the loyalty and the trust if you constantly, because they constantly update the ways that they plug in, which happens with technology, but then not providing the new avenue. If that's your first iPhone ever, say you're a 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid, this is the money you've been saving, and you're going in to get an iPhone, then you got to buy a charger on the side. Like that's where, in my mind, the marketing doesn't work, because you're assuming that every person that's buying is already an existing customer. What about this young kid who it's his first time or her first time buying the phone, and now they got to spend the extra $30 on the charging point or whatever it is? Oh, but we give you a cable. Like, the fairness is not there. They're getting to a point where they're taking, not 100%, but they're taking advantage of the loyalty of their customers, going, you're existing, you've already got all the stuff, so why do you need more of it? But they're not looking at, maybe because they're the biggest company in the world or something, that they're not looking at still getting new customers, going, if this is your first phone, we should give you the complete package. And I think that's something that they've missed the mark on that. But they are the biggest company in the world. What am I sitting here talking about?
By metrics, as I said, that's the difference between process and outcome. What we're talking about is process.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you progress and maintain and develop the trust to allow that relationship to keep expanding?
That's one thing that my dad taught us at the takeaway shop, because where we came from, we were going through a rough patch in my parents' older business, which was doing plastic takeaway containers. And then China came in, undercut the market and just dumped all the prices, which happens. But my dad used the example to us that whoever came in the door, you've got to treat them with respect and give them the best food that we can, because you don't know if they've been saving all week for this. At that point, it was a $7 souvlaki.
Yeah.
So you don't know if they've been saving all week just to pay for this one $7 souvlaki. You can't make it a bad one.
Yeah.
You don't know everyone's situation. So that $7 might have been a full week of them or 2 weeks. And if they're coming to give it to their kids and them, they might be saving 3 weeks to have that one experience.
Yeah.
Make that the best.
Yeah.
And that's how we built trust.
It could be the highlight of their day or week.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a great point.
That's how we maintained it. Was every customer that came in, we treated them fairly. And it didn't matter who it was. In Fitzroy, there's a lot of homeless people. There's a lot of people who have drug addictions. We treated them all the same. Sometimes we wanted to move them on a bit faster because they were not they weren't sober in the right ways, and we didn't want them around families, but we would move them along, but they still got the same best quality product. And that's why they kept coming back to us, because we treated them with fairness.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, most of the people who were in the shop saw how we dealt with those people, and they got behind us even more, because they're like, you treat everyone like the same person.
I just want to share this story. Actually, it just
I just saw something clicking.
Yeah, I did because I had the, if you're watching this, you might have seen a spark come out of my bald head just then. But years ago, I was involved in Rotary. I was a Rotarian in country New South Wales, and one of the guys owned a supermarket. And it only just occurred to me when you were saying that, and they had a problem. He was in a small, he was in Dubbo in a country New South Wales when I got to meet him. But previous to that, he owned a supermarket in a smaller regional area, and they were having problems with kids coming in and stealing food, and a lot of the kids were Indigenous kids. And rather than, after he caught one of the kids, he'd say, look, what's going on and whatever. He goes, listen, I'm sorry, I don't get to eat. And so what this guy did is he went, wow, okay, here's a situation. They're stealing food, not because of maliciousness, but they're hungry. So what he did, and it fitted into his basically philanthropic component. He used to put breakfast on for all the kids.
Oh,
because a lot of the kids would go to school without food, and so what he said is, okay, great, come in and have breakfast every day. It's on me, and he would provide food. So what happens? Sales, the amount of people stealing from him plummeted significantly, right? Why? Because he built trust with them, and so consequently, by providing food, he ensured that, look, they're going to school fed, and that felt good for him. But the ripple effect is they didn't want to steal from a guy who was taking care of him.
Yeah.
So his business didn't suffer because he identified what was going on. Phenomenal situation, a phenomenal number one, forgiveness, but also seeing the bigger picture of what's going on.
Yeah, it's a
And
great
so
outcome.
level of fairness to go, okay, I get it. It's not about me. It's about your circumstances. If I can help you, and just by doing that, it was a perfect example
Yeah.
of that. So that's why the spark went up.
And that was a great story.
Yeah, but I got heaps of stories. Heaps of stories coming out when you're longer on this planet. You got multiple opportunities for stories. So I got plenty of them.
I don't know if we've got enough gigabytes on the
We
internet
probably
for
don't have
the
for
story.
all the stories. They're all true. Point number 6, and this is actually going to be an extension of that. What endears you? What builds trust from people with you to you is your level of openness and vulnerability. All right. So Brené Brown, which we've referenced before, has done a lot of work in the power of vulnerability. I personally have, had more impact and effect with the people I work with the moment I made the decision to be open and vulnerable, and specifically about the challenges and problems or obstacles that I've had to face, and not masking up and going, yeah, look, I'm 10 foot tall and bulletproof and I've never had a problem in my life. It's not about oversharing. It's about going, hey, man, I'm human too. I get this. I understand that. And so as a business, if you are communicating your vulnerability, your openness, your humanness, what that does is it humanizes you with your people, and it helps build trust in there. So you'll see quite often, particularly in the marketing campaigns, some of the most like Bunnings, which is a hardware chain here in Australia, has people who work in the stores who are very humanistic, and they're vulnerable and they're open, and they're not the model type looking people.
Yeah.
Right? They're just normal people who are talking about the challenges, and that endears people to that brand. So they trust them as they go, hey, they're real.
Yeah. That's who they have on their ad campaigns. It's not some polished model that you could see they've never worked in the store. It's just the actual employees. They get the script and they read the script, and a lot of the time they seem to go off the script. But that's what's endearing. The one thing I've found personally, not about them, but just about vulnerability, is now people being vulnerable opens you up to so many people, and you get that connection and that trust. But some people are now taking it too far because they're bringing the victim mentality into it. And this is where I'm always a bit cautious about how vulnerable you have to be.
There's a difference between vulnerability and oversharing.
Yeah.
Right. There's a big and what's the objective behind it? Because if the sharing is victim save me, then people can see that. There's a particular trend. You know what happens? Some people will ensnare willing rescuers, and I'm a recovering rescuer, right?
Yeah.
So I was always the bloke who would save people. Because I think it gave me a level of validation, and in my identity is like, hey man, you're like Superman. You're saving people left, right, and center. Up until the point where I wised up and went, hang on a sec, like I'm enabling this behavior by doing that. So I totally get what you're saying, and you've got a valid point. Vulnerability was more about showing you the soft underbelly and go, hey man, I'm human. This is me. Cut me, I bleed too. I just want to let you know, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm a rescue, but I'm just letting you know this is what's going on for me.
Yeah, I agree. Where you're coming from is coming from a place of openness, and I understand that. But some people have just taken it too far, and that shows distrust in my mind now because I'm like, you're just doing this for views. You're just doing this for sympathy. You're just doing this for clout. This is not genuine. And then I start losing trust in people because I'm like, and that's on social media more so because you can see that that's what gets the likes, that's what gets the reshares, and I'm like, yeah, that's not what I'm about. I'm about being open and honest and going, hey, I had a shit day, but tomorrow's going to be better, or this didn't work out, and when I was in my apprenticeship, I cut my finger a few times, but I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just saying, when people see me cutting onions now, and I do it basically with my eyes closed, holding a conversation, and people are like, oh, it's so impressive. I go, yeah, but I cut my finger so many times. I'm not saying that I'm a victim. I'm saying it took me a lot of experience to get to the point where I can do it without looking at it.
Yeah.
So that's where the openness and vulnerability comes in.
So there's a sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
Is the extreme, which is fake.
Yeah.
And, you look at Instagram and so many times I've lost count of them, people go, listen, I don't believe anything that I see on Instagram.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, unless it's the stories that look, but most of it is just manufactured and stuff. And the other extreme you're talking about is the oversharing, right?
Yeah.
So if we can somehow get in the middle and
that sweet spot
of going, hey, vulnerable, and go, hey, this is where I'm at. These are the struggles that I'm following through. It's different if your product is meant to be polished. That's different.
Yeah.
But if you're putting that out as, hey, this is me. I just wake up and my hair's always perfect, all that stuff, then you don't build trust. But if you're constantly poor meing in between,
Yeah.
that's going to be the case in there. And if as a brand, as a company, you're doing that, that doesn't endear you to people and you lose trust in them.
I agree. And, being vulnerable and open, like seeing a man cry openly on social media, that doesn't affect me. I don't get upset. I don't lose trust in that person. But if 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 of their posts are them being vulnerable and opening up and crying, I'm like, this is just getting sympathy votes now. Then I lose trust in that. But I don't mind if men cry or this is why, and I'm talking about men specifically because I know Jim does a lot about masculine vulnerability. And this is something that Lewis Howes, the mask of masculinity, I agree about that vulnerableness and it's okay to cry. But, then there's a point where it's just too much and I lose trust.
Yeah, if it's manipulative in the context of doing it, I think that's what you're talking about. That's what I'm understanding. So as a company, as a brand, if you're using vulnerability in a manipulative form, that's gonna build trust with your people either as well. So at either extreme. So I think spot on in terms of if you can have an awareness around being okay being you and showing that as a face to the world or expressing to them some of the challenges and obstacles that you face, that's going to humanize you and it's going to endear you to your people.
Yeah, and that's why, all these points can't just always be positive. There's positives and negatives. Being vulnerable is good. Being too vulnerable or victim is bad.
Yeah, spot on. So, Adam, they're the 6 points that we had, and I just want to focus on some key points in not only this episode, even the one before, which will assist and help people get a better handle and understanding of trust and the importance that it has in building the relationships with your businesses and your customers. So number one is the more your clients and customers trust you, the more they're going to be willing to do business with you. Right? I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Number two, the development and maintenance of trust is an ongoing process that requires regularly honoring agreements as well as meeting and exceeding their expectations. So we've shared, and you've shared specifically, countless examples of where honoring agreements, meeting expectations is what builds trust over the short, medium, and long term. So that's really, really important. And thirdly, higher levels of trust lead to higher levels of customer retention, which ultimately, from a business perspective, increases your longevity and possibly your profitability as well. So there's trust as a metric is really important. Sorry, let me rephrase that. It's hard to quantify trust, but it's an important consideration as a metric to help you to increase the viability of your business as well. So we're only putting it in the lens of business because that's the theme of the podcast, but 360 degree, it's such important in all areas.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So Adam, there's some action steps for people in this podcast as well, if they so choose to want to solidify the learnings. And that would be, number one, to review some of the steps that we've covered already in terms of how do you develop and build trust and identify which particular areas may be areas they could do better. And number two, step two would be, if you have identified some areas that would be helpful for you to develop, what are 2 or 3 things that you could do that would leverage that? So for example, if you wanted to focus on your transparency, what are 2 or 3 things that you could do that you could action that would help build trust within the people that you're dealing with? Great. Awesome. Any final thoughts or comments for you as we close out the episode, Adam?
Just that you should be open and honest, be transparent, and treat your customer base how you would want to be treated. If you open and fair with your customers, that's how you get return business. And the best way I like to do it is, how would a supplier be to me? Like, how is my ideal supplier? And that's how I try to be to my customers. So just being, some of the best companies I deal with, they've built trust from before I was with them. Like, they just come, talk, hey, I know you're with this company, but if you ever need anything, here's my card. And they built the trust. Like, I'm not going to be pushy. We've got better prices. We've got bigger range, but I know you're happy with them. But they've always started with that. And I go, hey, that's how I want to be. I just want to be around. People know me. If they want to jump ship, we're more than happy to take them. So just, yeah.
Well, so the rule of karma and the golden rule.
Yeah.
Right? So that's exactly right. Do unto others as you want to be done to you.
Yeah.
Right? So treat them the way you want to be treated. Treat them fairly, with respect, with courtesy, with fairness, all those principles that we're talking about. That's leveraging and building the relationships which we're talking about. So that's a great way to cap out the episode, Adam. So thank you once again, and thank you to our listeners for joining us again on this podcast. So a reminder that if you'd like to connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and the Extended Launch and Beyond community, you can do so through these channels. If you've got any questions or comments you have about our podcast, or anything you'd like support with, that's me just being transparent and choking on my words, you can do so. Quite often, a lot of times people have thoughts and ideas and questions that they'd love to pose to the group but are too shy in coming forward. Please do so. Your share, your comment, your question may be the catalyst that will open up a learning for somebody else as well. And finally, if you're enjoying the podcast and finding value in it, we'd be grateful if you go over to iTunes and leave us a review. That allows us to build up our community and have a bigger impact with them as well. So for me, thank you once again for joining us, and goodbye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.